The other great part of my work that probably wasn't mentioned is I have the extraordinary privilege week in, week out, and have done for over a decade, of getting to sit at the feet of some of the world's extraordinary leaders, whether it's Barack and Michelle Obama, the Malcolm Gladwells of the world, Sir Ken Robinsons, Condoleezza Rice, people who are thinking, pioneering across business, across public sector, across civil society, and to be able to pick their brains for nuggets and to acknowledge patterns. To be able to work out what is it that makes these leaders stand out, what has allowed them to be able to have impact where others have maybe hit a wall or been challenged. What is it that makes them stand out? And during the pandemic, while I was a lockdown Victorian for the better part of 2 years, I chose to consolidate that body of work into my first book. And that is what we'll hand out some copies of today, but is broadly kind of the framing that I want to offer for the way that I'm going to talk to you about leadership today. That book was motivated actually by my time at the Kennedy School, where going and doing the lit review, so to speak, on leadership left me a little bit wanting. Firstly, because the examples that I read about leaders almost exclusively talked about white male military generals and sports coaches. There weren't public sector leaders. There weren't people from different cultural backgrounds or different countries. There weren't women being showcased and highlighted as case studies. The list goes on. And we all know in this room, because you live and breathe it and see it every day with the interaction that you have with the community, that that is not what leadership looks like as it is. And it also cannot be what leadership looks like moving forward if we're going to be able to progress the significant and systemic changes and challenges that we need to find a way through and be able to make together. And so there was a want to disrupt the case studies. So there's more than 60 case studies in the book. Over half of them are female. They're from 14 different countries, leaders as young as their 20s, as old as 88, and everything in between. And so it was a want to do that. But the second thing was, it was a want to make it pragmatic and practical. Because all too often I think leadership hides behind big words and concepts and lacks that relevance around the day-to-day ability to impact your lives and to help you move the ball on the issues that sit in front of you and the challenges before you. People often say to me, what's the pattern, if anything, between all these leaders you've been able to interview? What if anything, connects a Richard Branson with a Billie Jean King, with a Michelle Obama or someone like that? And if I can answer that question, I would say two things to that inform the design of the book I showed you just there. The first is, without exception, it is so clear that each and every one of those leaders has done the work on themselves. They know what they stand for, what they believe in a way that's quite magnetic. Like when people ask me what was interviewing Obama like, he's like a metronome. The first thing I actually go to is an energetic description, because there is such a calm, quiet strength. Now, I feel Chatham House rules in the room today, yeah? I'm holding you to that. No live tweeting, if anyone's still on Twitter. Australian politicians, by contrast, sometimes can feel a little bit like golden retrievers, right? Like the desire to get patted and affirmed. We've moved a little bit away from some of that vintage, perhaps, but certainly it was very clear that there was someone who deeply interrogated their beliefs and understood what they believed in. And I could say that over and over again about any individual that's been prepared to strike out in the name of something significant that's a departure from the way things were done. Whether that's a vision for a nation, whether that's an entrepreneurial new endeavour as a company, whether that's a belief that they could move the dial on a social issue that they cared about, and everything in between. The second part is, though, they've then been courageous enough to do something about that. Put it out into the world and to realise that nothing great happens on our own island. Great things are always accomplished in concert with other people. And so the book is split into two halves. The first part is all about learning to lead ourselves, because until we get to the heights of what we ourselves are capable of in our own self-leadership, until we can lead ourselves, we cannot lead others. And the second half is all about what are the strategies for how we can lead ourselves in a way that's going to help us get impact and cut through. Today, we're going to spend a little bit of time flipping between both. And I'll continue to pull out some of these ideas, but I want to just set that framing, because I think it's so important to understand the context as we talk about leadership. And we'll come back to context of this moment in time in a minute.